So this shouldn't be brand new, but now you have good notes, and we're going to go through it a little bit more slowly and get a lot of practice so that we're super comfortable and confident. So this first section of chapter 2 is multiplying integers. All right, so the rules are a little different than what we've been doing with adding and subtracting, so make sure it's super important that you always note what operation you're doing. Because if you're adding or subtracting, you're going to attack the problem differently with its signs than if you are multiplying or dividing. Okay? If you multiply two numbers with the same sign, the answer will be positive. So no matter what, if the sign is the same, the answer is positive. If they're both positive and we're multiplying, the answer is positive. If they're both negative and we're multiplying, the answer is positive. So the signs are the same, it will always be positive. Okay? And if the signs are different, if you multiply two numbers with different signs, the answer will always be negative. Okay, so a negative times a positive is a positive times a negative is a negative. Different signs give you a negative product. When multiplying, if they're the same, it's positive. If they're different, it's negative. So the rule is fairly easy. All right, I'll give you a second to copy these down, and then we'll go through the answers together. So just multiply the absolute values, like just the number part, and then make sure you put the right sign on your answer based on our rules. If the signs are the same, the answer will be positive. If the signs are different, the answer will be negative. Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So that pops up too. Okay, so it's important to know, sort of now that we're in 7th grade and we're working with signs, 0 is an acceptable answer. You can get 0 and it can be correct. So don't think that if you got 0, it's wrong or something's wrong. It will happen. You can have negative numbers as answers, negative fractions, negative decimals, and that is okay. So just get comfortable with that. All right, let's look at letter A, -5 times -6. First, we multiply the absolute values, and then we need to put the right sign on it. What is our answer? Charlie? 30. Positive, why? Charlie? Good. Both are the same signs. Two negatives equal a positive when multiplying. Letter B, 3 times a -4. John, what'd you get?
-12.
-12 is correct. Why did you say it was negative?
Because there are different signs.
Different signs gives us a negative product. Very good. All right, Hazen, letter C.
Is it 0?
It is 0. Anything multiplied by 0 is 0. Very good. And finally, letter D. Dane, what'd you get?
24.
24. Why is it positive?
Because the signs are the same.
The signs are the same, so we have a positive product. Very good. Okay? Now, this is important. This is where it might be a little bit new, maybe a little bit tricky, so we'll do a couple to practice, but make sure that you remember this. If a negative number is in parentheses and taken to a power, so we're talking about exponents here. If it's in parentheses, you will multiply it with the negative by itself, however many times the exponent tells you to. So if it's in parentheses, that negative stays with the number when you do your repeated multiplication. If a number is in parentheses, a negative number is in parentheses, and it's raised to a power, so if it has an exponent, you multiply the repeated multiplication with the exponent. Okay, for example,
What does that minus mean? Is that a negative?
a negative with the negative sign, yes. Okay, for example, I have the quantity -3. So do you see how the negative sign is in the parentheses with the 3?
Yeah.
What that means is we are multiplying -3 by itself 2 times. That's what an exponent is. Well, technically, we need to do this. Negative 3 times negative 3, because it was in parentheses, we keep that negative 3 in parentheses and multiply it by itself 2 times because our exponent was a 2, right? And then you can see we have a negative times a negative, so our answer is positive 9. Charlie.
When you're always doing a negative to a power,
Mm-hmm.
will the answer always be positive?
That's a good question. So if you're taking a negative in parentheses to a power, if it's an even power, it'll be positive. If it's an odd power, it will be negative. Okay? So let me show you. Let me show you. What if I had this? If I had negative 3 in parentheses to the third power, what this really means is that whole negative 3 in parentheses times itself 3 times because it's to the third, right? Now, as we start doing our multiplication, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And then times a negative 3, what are we going to get now? Negative 27. So you don't need to necessarily memorize that, but it's a pattern that you'll notice.
It's like negative times the negative times the negative.
Because you'll always have that outlier negative that's going to make the whole thing negative if it's odd. John?
So for the one in D,
Uh-huh.
passes negative 3 and 2 buckets, so that just means like you just have to write that 2 times.
I don't know. Okay, now, if a number is raised to a power and the negative sign is not in parentheses, then the answer will stay negative. Basically, you tack that negative sign onto the answer after you do the exponent. So this is if it is not in parentheses. Okay? If a number is raised to a power and the negative, I just put a little minus sign there. I didn't write it all out. If the negative is not in parentheses, then the answer stays negative. So you have to be really careful because the negative sign will affect your answer, especially if they give you a more complicated order of operations problem, which they will. Okay? So be careful. For example, notice how this one is different than the first example. We have negative 3. It is not in parentheses to the second power. So what we're going to do is do our exponent first, order of operations. We do exponents before we do any multiplication or anything. So 3 squared is what? 9. 3 times 3. And that negative sign just tacks onto the answer. Do you see that? Negative 3 times 3. And then our answer is negative 9. Because we're not multiplying the negative 3 quantity by itself 2 times. We're just tacking the negative onto the end. Okay? So just be careful. The parentheses matter, and they start to matter a lot. Okay? Oliver?
What exactly do the parentheses do?
They tell you that it's a quantity, so that has to stay together. The parentheses tells you this must stay together. And if you don't have them, then it doesn't indicate that they have to stay together. So like with no parentheses, it doesn't mean that that negative has to stay every time you multiply the 3. It doesn't. It just sticks on the outside. Charlie?
What if you have parentheses but the negative is outside?
Then it would stay negative. Then you still just tack that negative on at the end. Yeah, good question. Okay, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. 10 seconds to catch up. Negative 2, that is in parentheses, squared, or to the second power. And then we have negative 2 not in parentheses, to the second power, or squared. They will have different answers, so be careful with your signs. Nope. All right, let's look at letter A. What does this mean? How should I write this in expanded repeated multiplication form? Nicholas?
Negative 2 times negative 2.
Yes. Okay, this is what this means. We are taking the negative 2 and we keep that negative in the parentheses and multiply it by itself. Now we have a negative times a negative. What's our answer, Vika?
4.
Positive 4. The signs are the same, so the product is positive. Okay? Letter B, John, what should I do?
So you take the -2 and put them like after.
Uh-huh.
And then you do, and then you put the +2 right next to it.
Yes.
And then your answer will be -4.
Very good. -4.
Because they're different signs.
Because they're different signs. Exactly. Good. Okay? Next up. Okay, can you do 3 in a row? The answer is yes, you can.
No.
The answer is yes. Can you multiply in any order? Yes. So choose a way that seems easy to multiply or go straight across. What would you do first? What would you do first, Hazen?
5 times -2.
Right, I would do -5 times -2 first because that's easy and that gets me 10. It's so easy to multiply by 10.
How did I get 7?
You added.
Oh, right.
But
All right, so I'm going to
It's 107.
do Hazen's first. So if we do this. So the 10, notice, will be positive if we do -2 times -5. And then we multiply 10 by 17. Charlie, what'd you get?
I got yes. What?
What did you get? 170. Good. Positive 170. All right. One more. Okay, order of operations. Please don't forget. Okay, we always do our parentheses or our grouping symbols. I like to call it grouping symbols rather than parentheses. First. So you must simplify within your parentheses first. Right? So within our parentheses, what is -3 plus 4? Vika? 1. Okay. So we did parentheses. Are there any exponents?
No.
No, so we won't need to do that step then. What should I do next after I do my exponents? Finn?
Well, you can do the 6 times 1.
Good.
But also you could just do -6 plus 6, and that'll equal 0.
Right. So, but first I want to do my multiplication.
You can just
Simplify.
yeah.
Yes. And then I get -6 plus 6. So that simplifies to 0. And is 0 an acceptable answer? Yes. Yes. Don't be freaked out by a 0. It is okay to get a 0 for an answer. All right. All right. You do not necessarily need to write this. But here's what the word problem is. So this is our little word problem example. Okay, here's what it says. You're playing a game. It's like a computer game or something, I think it said. No. It says for each mistake you make, you lose 50 points. Okay, and then for each second that you finish the game under 10 minutes, that you beat the game under 10 minutes, you gain a point. Okay, so here's how you did. Bless you. You start with 250. You finish in 8 minutes and 45 seconds. And you make 3 mistakes. So what is your final score? You start with 250 points. So let's start with that. This is what you started with, 250. What's one thing we can start with? What's one thing we could do first? What do you see and what can we do? Sam?
We could minus the 50 points because of mistake.
Very good. So you made 3 mistakes. And what did they say about mistakes? Each mistake costs you, Vika?
50 points.
Good. So if you made 3 mistakes and each costs you 50 points, how many points are you going to lose from here, Hazen?
150.
Okay. So for your mistakes, you've lost 150 points. So that would leave us with what, 100? You've got 100 points left. What's the other part of this that we need to factor in? Caroline?
You have to, for all of the points that you make
Yes. So it says every second that you're under 10 minutes, you add a point. So how many seconds under 10 minutes is this? How many seconds under 10 minutes? Isabella? 75. 1 minute is how many seconds? 60. So if we go from 10 minutes to 9 minutes, that was 60
Just do
seconds.
6 or 8 times 6.
And then 45 seconds to 60 seconds. Make sure you're not going to 100 because we're just going to a minute. So to 60 seconds is 15. Okay, so 75 seconds under 10 minutes means you get how many more points? 75. You get a point per second. Okay, so you finished with how many points in the game? 175. Word problem, we label. So we add a point for every minute or every second under 10 minutes. Okay, so just like a real world application of using negatives and positives. Bridget.
Why didn't we make 8 minutes into seconds and add 45 into that and then add those points?
You could do that. It would be a lot more work. You could just know that, like, to get to 9 minutes, it would be 15 seconds. And to get from 9 minutes to 10 minutes, it would be 60 seconds. Right? So, like, you could do that, but that's going to get huge. 8 times 60 plus 45, then you have to subtract it from 10 times 60. That's going to get really big numbers. So think of it like, just like a clock. From 45 to 60 is 15. And then 1 more whole minute is 60 more seconds. Okay? Okay.